Chapter 3. The Abandoned Village. After days of walking through the forest, Ollie and Layla were exhausted, yet they moved cautiously toward their goal. The forest seemed endless, with danger lurking at every corner. Late in the day, they began to notice a change in the surrounding terrain, as signs of ancient life emerged, abandoned huts and narrow paths overgrown with grass. "I think this is an old village," Layla said, glancing around cautiously. Ollie took a few steps forward and replied, "But it looks deserted. There's no sign of life here." The two advanced toward the village, but something felt off. The cold wind blowing between the huts carried with it a strange sensation, as if the air itself was laden with danger. Layla suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, "Do you feel something unnatural?" Ollie nodded and answered, "Yes, the place seems to be warning us about something." As they ventured deeper into the village, they noticed that the huts appeared relatively well preserved, despite being abandoned for a long time. In the center of the village stood an old well, which seemed to have been the hub of life in this place before it became just a memory. But suddenly, Ollie felt a slight movement beside the well. Before he could comprehend what was happening, strange-looking beings appeared. They were human but grotesquely deformed. Their eyes were hollow, their skin pale, and their bodies moved slowly, as if they had lost the ability to control them. "What are these?" Ollie shouted nervously. Layla looked at them in shock and said, "I can't believe it. They were human once." One of the beings slowly approached them, making incomprehensible sounds. It seemed to be trying to communicate, but the words were unclear. As it got close enough, Ollie could see the pain in its eyes. It was clear that it was no longer what it once was. "We need to get away," Layla said, pulling Ollie by the arm. But the beings began to move faster toward them, as if sensing the presence of intruders. Their steps became more aggressive, and their eyes glowed with suppressed rage. Ollie and Layla found themselves trapped in the village square. "We need to find a place to hide," Layla screamed, looking around for an escape. They spotted an old hut nearby and ran toward it as fast as they could. Once inside, Layla slammed the door shut and propped it with a plank lying on the ground. What happened to these people? Ollie wondered, trying to catch his breath. Layla looked outside through a small opening in the wall and said, "I think they transformed because of their greed." The creatures roamed around the cabin, searching for a way to enter. Their slow, heavy footsteps made the sounds they produced even more terrifying. "We need to get out of here before they find a way to us," said Layla, scanning the room for another exit. Fortunately, she found a small window at the back leading to the forest behind the village. "We'll get out through here," she said, pointing to the window. "But they'll follow us," Ollie said hesitantly. "We have to move quickly before they realize what we're doing," Layla replied firmly. Ollie climbed out of the window first, followed quietly by Layla. Once outside, they began to run swiftly among the trees, trying to distance themselves from the abandoned village as fast as they could. But before they could get far, a massive figure appeared before them, larger than the creatures they had seen before. It was the leader of the creatures, and he looked furious and deranged. He wielded a huge sword made of ancient bones, and his eyes burned with the fire of greed. "You will not escape from here. The book is ours. You will not take it," he shouted in a powerful voice that made the trees tremble. Layla looked at Ollie and said, "We have to run as fast as we can. We can't confront him now." The two dashed into the forest at full speed, with the leader of the creatures chasing them with heavy steps. His rage blinded him, and the ground shook beneath his feet with every step. Finally, after a long chase, Ollie and Layla managed to escape their pursuer and entered deep into the dense forest, where they disappeared among the trees and shadows. Breathing heavily, sweat dripping from their faces, Ollie paused for a moment to catch his breath, then looked at Layla and said, "What have we gotten ourselves into? This journey is not what I expected." Layla smiled wearily and said, "I told you this wouldn't be easy. The book is not just a legend, and anyone who seeks it will face unimaginable forces." Ollie looked at the dark forest around him and said, But we're still at the beginning, right? Leila nodded and said, yes, and this is just the beginning. Wisdom. Greed corrupts the spirit before it corrupts the body.